Welcome everyone. Come on in. Today we're going to talk about transfinite experience here on Intermediate Selfology. This is where awareness is apperception, attention, and apprehension. And as you can see, they relate to, apprehension relates to the finite world. Attention relates to the transfinite world. You can put your attention on your feelings, on your thoughts, on your wills, on your memories, on your future expectations and ideals. You can put it wherever you want. You're in an irreal environment when you're in the psychical realm of the epistic self, which is the transcendental self. That's the self that can step away from everything and goes, I see myself as this, or I think such and such, or I self-reflect, or I remember such and such. These are all upon transfinite threads that create the tapestry of your own individual consciousness. Now, all of this, of course, we put within the framework of the 7 pristine ideas that arise naturally in all of our lives as being part of conscious human beings. Transfinite experience is actually an amalgam of things, 3 things, apperception, attention, and apprehension, that we could break down accordingly. And as I refer to the one self, your one self, each of us has an archaic self. The archaic self is the self that functions as, it's like the Trinity. It's one substance and it has 3 aspects. The substance itself are these 3 aspects. When we're speaking of the archaic self, it is nothing more than the agnostic self, the epistic self, and the empiric self as these work as a whole, which of course makes that whole, that archaic self, something which is irreducible to any of these as singular columns that make up the transfinite experience. So the transfinite experience is tri-founded. It's the relation of the experiencer, the experienced, and the experiencing what's going on by the epistic self. So when this is occurring, very quickly, let's snap onto this and look at one's microcosmic self, your individual self as a trigonic self in the trilocum, that is, in the realm of infinity as an agnostic self. In Hindu terminology, it's called the arupa loka. It's without form, it's boundless, it's limitless, it's immeasurable. And that is referred to through various traditions as spirit or as pneuma, that is, as the essential life energy, composed of, remember, as this existential vibration at this level, the agnostic self, as the highest part, the most tied in aspect of one's conscious being. It's tied into the greater escape at an infinite level. It's not going away. There was never a time when it did not exist, and there will never be a time when it does not exist as a vibration. And at that level, as a spirit, remember, it is a self that's intuiting all of it all at once, and that's true knowing. That's knowing. But it also is willing, and it's feeling, and it's thinking, and it's doing. That is, it has life. So all of these things are what are unfolding from the top all the way through the bottom. And related at here is conscience and will and intelligence, mind, sentience, which is love, and vivacience, which is life. biotens, which is the minocosmic composed body. You are not just tied into the world in some sort of direct fashion. You are implanted or embedded as a subject in the empirical world. And the empirical self is the self that has the perspective, the focal setting of consciousness that discerns individual things, particulars. And so it sees sections of space. It has spans of time. It has series of causation. And it has scenes that it puts together in some miraculous way to fashion out of the manifold of sensations and vibrations approaching some kind of order, imposing some kind of order upon the chaos of the manifold vibrations that always are entering into each of our sensory doorways, if you will. So when we're talking about the agnostic self, the epistic self, and the empiric self, that I shall go over there in a bit, we're talking about basically these things. The upper part of the cognostic octahedron, the lower part, the form part, the rupa part. This is arupa, this is rupa, but this area here is the epistic self in Kamaloka, the desire realm. The desire realm is the realm in which you, as a transcendental ego, as an epistic self, spin out everything that you consider as the me. It is my thought, it's my feeling, it's my action, it's my will, it's my resolution. I was in my space. Everything is related to you. Somebody walks in and they walked into your life world. So anything that has a life world has an ego because it's relating things to itself. You relate these finite things and your focal setting is there. This is your empiric self with the empirical ego. And the empirical ego is the individual sense of concrete or existential reality that you have as being in this world. You're an embedded subject in an extruded world. But we were talking about this minocosmically composed body, right? It isn't as if I, as the microcosm, all of this, am not owning the body in which I'm inhabiting. Of course I do. Of course I do. And it's dependent in a lot of ways. My psychical nature is dependent in a lot of ways upon it. And it depends for its safety and its security and its nutrient satisfaction, etc., upon my mind, my psyche, my, if you will, soul, psyche, epistic self. And at that level of the epistic self in this realm of desire, where you're the center, the hub of the psychical wheel, and all the spokes are your spokes, feelings, thoughts, etc., within your mental world, that mental world, when coupled with the finite world, is what is called the psychophysical organism. That's the organism that the human is in terms of these two sets, the epistic self and the empiric self together. They're based, however, on the agnostic self, which is the very ground of consciousness. So if you want to simplify things, you look upon the agnostic self as consciousness of. It's consciousness of the finite things around you. The epistic self is consciousness as. You are experiencing things as that psyche, as that soul, as that feeling, sentient entity, etc. I reversed it. The empiric self is the self that I was referring to in terms of the setting of the empirical ego is to contact finite things through finite senses. That's the embodied self. And the extruded other seems to be all the other things around us in which we're immersed. However, as I'm pointing out, with the composed body, this body is the same stuff that the rest of the universe is composed of, except a really unique arrangement here as a human being through the genetic informational imprint of DNA. And that's a marvelous thing to be able to pass on in finite terms. That is a map that regulates the becoming of my material organism. However, there is as well a generative aspect, and that is there can be no thought that I have that I'm not generating, no feeling I have that I'm not generating. There is no sensation I have that I am not generating as a subject, and that's the epistic self. And at any time, as that epistic self, I, as a transcendental ego, can step away from any of the episodes I've participated in, any of the events that I recall. And I can manipulate them in transfinity any which way I'd like. And that's the psyche, that's the soul, that's the epistic self. Now there's another setting. And this is a setting of the agnostic self as the transcendent ego. The transcendent ego transcends both the transcendental ego and the empirical ego. The transcendent ego is not involved in the particular affairs of the finite ego and the finite world, yet it's the basis of them. Nor is it involved in the interscape of each of us as we generate as an I and a me, that is my thoughts and my feelings and my wills, all of those things internally. Remember, these two are different. One is productive causation, right? The empirical world is a world of productive causation. There are causes, there are effects. And it seems to occur within a serial concatenation. The effect always follows the cause, all right? There seems to be an arrow in causation that is carrying it forward. However, there is synchronous interrelation in terms of the epistic self, which means that it can't possibly manifest any particular thing unless it is utilizing its energy of awareness and apperception and consciousness. And this is the aspect of awareness that allows the complete union, enosis, of all the various aspects of your transfinite psyche as well as your finite body and emotional and mental bodies as well. So in terms of transfinite experience, we're looking at awareness as the basic archaic self and as the various aspects of that archaic self play themselves under three different focal settings that we all have. It isn't as if you move from one realm to another. You can do that in terms of your attention. You're doing that as a psyche. If you pay attention to the outer world in terms of observation, in the natural world, in the social world, in any other kind of world in which you participate as an empirical being, well, that's an outer scape. That's the outer scape, and all of us have our own unique perspectives on that from our body, as well as perspectives from our own emotional vantage points and our own mental viewpoints. However, all three, whether it's apperception, which is, of course, consciousness perceiving itself. So if we look upon the empiric self as consciousness of finite objects, if we look upon the epistic self as consciousness as these various ongoing experiences that you're entertaining, we look at the agnostic self in terms of its apperception as consciousness per se. That is the nature of consciousness. Consciousness, when filtered, is aware of something that's extruded to itself or objective, even in terms of its mental content, as when you have a dream or when you think of a particular image or you have a particular concept. That's your inner scape. All of this using your sensory apparatus. This is your outer scape. However, the greater scape is what allows you as consciousness to have the self-consciousness of the psyche, as well as the other consciousness down here in the realm of the empirical world. So very quickly, in terms of the three aspects, we're looking at the agnostic self as the knower, where the epistic self is the knowing. It's what's going on in the epistic self at the moment in the transfinite level. Just as the infinite is taking place as a transagent causality. Here, there's interagent causality in terms of the epistic self. You make your own causes and effects in your inner scape. That's what defines your inner scape. It's much like your own private psychical universe. However, there is interagent causality out here within the empirical realm. I can affect something, and I affect it through a medium. I affect it through a body. Why? Because the body is already inhabiting this world. It is composed minacosmically of all the ingredients and elements of this world, as the world constitutes everything in its differential patterns. However, when it comes to the epistic self, there isn't any formula out here or form out here that one is going to be able to behold, except the forms that are produced by the agent who is what? Doing, thinking, feeling, willing, and intuiting it all in terms of the transfinite level. Apperception, therefore, is consciousness which is immediately, transparently aware of itself. The transfinite consciousness of the epistic self is the attention that we all own, which is that focal ability of the psychic dimension of you as a transcendental ego, to take your psychic energy and put it on one particular object, whether that object is an internal one of the psychical world or an external one of the physical world. It doesn't really matter. The point is, from the angle of you as a subject, that is an object that's been generated. So in terms of the finite world, and you'll notice I've coded these so that the intuiting as apprehending the experience. Everything that you remember, of course, has happened. The reason that you even have a memory of it is because you have an apperception of the event as it actually is going on. Right? None of these things, as I've said, is really something that exists independently of each other. When we're talking about your ability to apprehend something, it's because there's attention there and there's apperception. Those are all the three aspects of awareness. So in terms of these three aspects of awareness, when we're looking at the apprehension, we're looking at the various things that appear in the conscience from the angle of will as orienting phenomena. The things in the world that orient us. They can be thoughts, they can be emotions, they can be any finite thing that helps orient us in terms of, like a compass, turning in our moral environment toward that which we know is more wholesome, in the sense that it adds something to the whole. It's wholesome. It doesn't subtract from the whole. It doesn't deteriorate the whole. It doesn't eliminate the whole. W-H-O-L-E. The universe. It adds to it. And in the same way that there are, I call them qualia, These are the qualities that you experience, just like telia are the willings that you experience. They are the intentions with a T. They are the resolutions. They are the aspects of will that automatically demonstrate themselves as these forms of what I've termed as orienting phenomena. Just like the qualia are felt phenomena. They give you what essentially is something that you feel. Whether it's a color, whether it's a smell, whether it's a taste, whether it's an emotion, whether it's an apprehension of a beautiful sunset or a stunning painting. Regardless, what you are experiencing is a quality, a feeling. And in the same way, the mind has its logia, its thoughts that it entertains, and the vidya appear as those aspects of life or vivations that are your dynamic phenomena. Just like with your mind, they are intelligible phenomena. But these are all finite things that happen, and when you're experiencing them, you're experiencing them in a section of space, where a span of time, through a certain series of causation, and amongst a group of entities, and each of them defined by their own unique essences. Now, your epistic self can pay attention to any of that at any time. It can sustain its attention, and that's where transformation happens. Because if the self can hold the attention upon what is going on in what it apprehends, as well as what is occurring in its own psychical mind stream, then it begins to change, as we said, the infinite down to the finite, and it transforms it. It can either transform it or form it for the better, which I call a self-transformation, or it can form it for the worse, which is a self-cisformation. Sort of spirals down. It's a bad habit, etc. So at this point, what you're looking to do is you're looking to do several things. Everything that you're experiencing in terms of your actual willings and thinkings and doings and feelings, all of it being intuited, these are all things which constitute attention at any given time. That is, that psychical aspect of awareness that allows you to focus, to pay attention, that is, to invest attensity, that is the attention faculty that you have, and invest it into what you apprehend, so that you can fuse the two. When that happens in meditation, that's single-mindedness. When you use mindfulness in order to pay attention to your thoughts and feelings, your bodily actions, and the reactions of people around you, as well as your own internal thoughts, that's mindfulness. And that mindfulness itself is occurring because of the attention of the epistic self. Beyond that, we have, of course, the infinite. And these are things where, as an apperceiver, you are going to be utilizing the fundamental energies that constitute you. I think, therefore I exist. I will, therefore I exist. I feel, therefore I exist. I do, therefore I exist. And I intuit it all, therefore I exist. Well, we're speaking of existence, therefore. We're speaking of everything from omniscience all the way down to biotons. And everything being opened up like a flower in between, as I've demonstrated before in terms of the cognography of human existence. Now, cognography is simply trying to map, right? Don't confuse the map with the territory. When you have a feeling, I may be pointing to it down here and says, well, that's part of your appetitive, your emotive self. That is a particular level of vibrational matter or energy that is higher, finer tuned than the physical, even the etheric and the subatomic area of the quantum mechanics. All of it together. What we're talking about in terms of transfinite experience, which you noticed is the word here, and here's the infinite, and here's the finite. So in our particular finite experiences in the material world, even on the subatomic plane, all of it being finite matter and interacting, being part of this ever-changing becoming that we often refer to. And then up at the top, in terms of the planes of being, we have the infinite, and that relates to our basic self, will, mind, heart, and life. And these can take various forms. They're either being creative, they're being preserved, right? That's that second line. They're being revealed, they're being concealed, or they're being reabsorbed. Any of that and all of that is happening. And what determines what's happening and what's being taken and absorbed at any moment, or what's new, what's going to be unfolded in the finite world, is the transfinite realm, where we are taking from the highest level of the universe's energy and bringing down to the finite level in manifestation, in which we see the interactions occurring in terms of concatenations. All of this is law-bound in the sense that it is all following dharma or certain principles, and these principles can be outlined in order to demonstrate the way that these function. And in the microcosmic self, they're regulated by omniversal principles. These omniversal principles are something that affects the coalescence and the interaction of all three of the selves as part of the same substance. It is what allows us to understand that transfinity is the transference of infinite potential into finite actuality. So until the next time that we meet, behave when you must, be good whenever you can, but above all else, be yourself.